Okay, so we're looking at a little linear amp here. I think this is a 2 transistor. It's got some type of Motorola devices in it of some sort. I'm just using my HP serving power supply for this. It makes a good talkback circuit with the distortion that, the combination of this amp and this radio are producing. So the radio is severely overmodulated. It's had like the truck stop peak and tweak or whatever you want to call it done to it. It's got an adjustable RF power here. The amp is keying just fine at a very low dead key. So let's see exactly where that is. Get this out of the dBm range. I was just making sure so about 1.3 watts on low is keying the amp. So we'll turn the amp back on. The amp keys up about 60. So big jump in carrier, huge jump. So let's just show what we're gonna put in. Turn this all the way up on Dynamic. And so this is average RMS power shown here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So about 5 average, something like that, 6 maybe at the most. Very low dead key out of this thing. So P 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, check, check. Now again, the amplifier does kind of attenuate a little bit of what the radio does. Without the amp in line, this thing was doing about 20 pp. So every time you add something into the chain, you're going to see a little bit less on a power meter. It's just normal. But anyways, it's going to drive the snot out of this amp. So let's put that back in average. Now again, this has high and low. This is low. So hello, 1, 2, hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, 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 hello. It makes a good talkback circuit. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. I can hear my voice through that power supply, which is kind of crazy, but it is what it is. The distortion is got to go somewhere, and usually it finds its way to a ground source, and that's where it like oscillates and you can hear it, and that's where we're hearing it through the power supply. And that's normally what you're going to hear. This is a basic, like I'd say this is like a 1990s early 2000 like truck stop setup. Somebody's going to go in and peak and tweak or whatever your radio, and you're going to run like a 2-pill or something back in those days, just something small, just to make noise. So let's look at it in PEP. So in PEP, it does about 200 watts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, check, check. Okay. Now we'll put it on high. It does about the same on high. Just the carrier goes up. So I'm going to lower this down. And yeah, we're keying it, but it's not enough dead key. You can hear it clicking. Okay, so now it's about set up where it's going to stay keyed. 85 watts, I think is what it showed. 80 something anyway. So turn the dynamic back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, check, check, hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, hello, check, check. She's wicked. PP. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, check, check. About the same, about 200 watts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, hello, check, 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 hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, hello, radio. Okay, so the problem here is when you look at the spectrum analyzer, we're putting positive power into the adjacent channels, which is bad, and this thing is taking up a ton of occupied bandwidth on the RF spectrum. Let me put a 1K tone in. I'm going to be very discreet with it because I don't want to be hard on this amp. I want to see if it's getting hot. Not too bad, so we should be okay. Okay, this is just the radio, so obviously I have my spectrum analyzer adjusted more to when the amp was powered on with it. But as we can see, it's very dirty. The oscilloscope looks just horrible. Again, I relate this to like a crab cake at Red Lobster. I mean, that's kind of what it looks like to me if it was sitting on its side. So, it's really bad. I'm actually going to do the test in low, because high power doesn't give us any more top end. It just gives us more carrier, which I don't really want to stress this amp more than I need to. So the radio is already keyed, so I'm going to switch the amp on. It's on low, and we're just going to Turn the RF up just to the amp keys, which it clicked on right there. About in the 40. I'm just trying to get it towards that about its lowest level, so it's about 40, something like that. Well, that's fine for what we want to do here. Again, I don't want to stress the amp too much, but now we're gonna key the amp with the tone, and we can see how bad it actually is now when you amplify a radio like this. I mean, it's just bad. It's flat. I mean, we're putting out a ton of power right into that next channel on each side. So let me span up some. Actually, I want to go about 40 just so we can get a good idea. Peak. So this is 205 right here. I want to go to 215. It's close enough right there. So still putting out a lot of power right there, and you can see, I mean, we're not dropping off below the 0 dBm line, which is where we should drop off on the first channel that we're on, no matter what kind of power we're pushing out. We're not dropping below 0, and it's really bad, this radio, the way that somebody modded it. It's pushing more distortion out up in channel than it is down in channel, which is crazy. But let's see here. Where do we drop below 0? Or it's a negative number. About 230, so a good, 30K up at least, which is, you're at least going to bleed 3+ channels each way running this setup like this, which is terrible. I mean, if we lower our mic gain down to the point where the radio would be considered clean, to about like that. I'm trying to get the modulation. That's how it should look. Look at that change. 30 dB negative, from where we were. It still looks really stupid. It looks like a Christmas tree effect, which it should. As we go up in frequency, it should sharply drop off, but it's still pushing way more power out to the right up in channel than down, which I don't understand that, but that's something to do with that mod. So I'm measuring modulation percentage right now. That's probably good there, about 93%. Still, the amplifier has an effect on the waveform and how it looks. It does kind of skew it some because it's just really an unlinear device, no matter how you look at it. They can call it a linear amp, but none of these CB quality amps are actually truly linear. They just put things on it to make it look good. They work. If you don't overdrive them, they sound pretty good, obviously, but the problem is people run radios, hot rodded radios like this radio, when it's turned way up and stuff, and then that becomes a major problem. So you can see where my mic gain is. Again, it's a major problem. PEP right now is about 158. That's with 94% modulation with the 1K tone. That's as clean as it's going to get, with this dirty radio. I'm going to hook up a radio that's much cleaner, that some would say, oh, they're not good on AM, and we'll see what kind of difference we get. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use the Aries 2. Now, this radio has about a 1 watt carrier or so, which makes the amp do about 49. And we're going to put the 1 kilohertz test tone in now. And we're going to see that the radio goes up there somewhere 70, 80 average, which is okay. Looks really clean here. No problems. Looks good on the scope. PEP power about 120. So I don't know what we were hitting it with that dirty Cobra 25, about 158 I think with the test tone. Now that's when I had it at its cleanest point, which still really wasn't that clean, because this is a balanced transmitter. What I mean by that is this is linear now. What's here is the same. What's here is the same. Everything's the same. What should be on this sideband and this sideband are both the same. On that Cobra, for some reason, the upper sideband's way cranked up and the lower is like kind of like so-so. So I don't understand the logic in that mod. But this is a linear. Now this amplifier is running more in a linear fashion. So, you know, we don't really see any issues there. The problem is, what people won't like about this is we're not getting full power. Well, okay, who cares about full power? Like, I mean, the radio's doing 120 right now. That 150, whatever that Cobra was pushing it to. No one in God's green earth is going to know that difference. Now, if you're trying to fight people locally and do that kind of stuff, then that's a different scenario, because local communication is all about location, location, location. If you're farther away from somebody and there's some guy in between that's just trying to agitate people with less power than you, but he's closer to person, location is number one. It's going to really you have to take that into account. You know, base stations, you know, we're in a fixed location. We can have big beams and all this stuff and more power than the next guy. But if that guy is closer, he's going to always key over top of you. I mean, it's just the way it is. So when we look at things, and when I say no one's going to notice, what I mean by that is no one like farther away is really going to notice that slight drop in power. If they do, it's not going to make a huge difference. We're not talking anywhere near even 1S unit, nowhere even near there, because we'd have to decrease our power by like 4 times, which obviously we haven't done. So let's put the mic on this, and I'm just curious to see what it's going to drive this amp to, and what our difference. Because remember, on that hopped up 25, we saw about 200 pp out. So what are we going to see here? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, check, check. About the same. It's about 120 to 140. So how much of a big difference did that make versus the really juiced up 25? Not very much, to be honest with you, power wise. And I guarantee you that this has a quality audio, because the amplifier is running in a linear fashion now. We're not driving the shit out of the amp, which is making it go into full-on distortion. I do not hear my audio coming through my power supply, which is another good sign that things are working properly. So it all starts with the radio. The radio can make things wreak havoc into an amp, and then the amp just reciprocates what the radio is telling it to do, and it's just a domino effect. What do we lose? Maybe 50 watts pp. Who cares? I mean, 50 watts is 50 watts, but the quality of audio that you're going to have now, and you can see here we're within at least that 6 kilohertz range that I say we should be in. We're nowhere near occupying a ton of extra bandwidth on the frequency that we don't really need anyways. This radio would sound really good probably running this amp right at this level. So let's see now. I'm just curious to see now, like, what will high power do. Remember, on high power before, it was just a higher dead key and a little, about the same pp, about 200. So this amp would run in a linear fashion, obviously with a properly aligned transmitter going into it, and it's not going to go into distortion mode, which it was, and distortion mode will give it more power, but it's not helping you. That's what guys just, I don't know, they just for whatever reason don't understand that, maybe. So we're just going to leave our RF power low. I think it should probably key the amp just a little bit under, so you can see when the amp is clicking that you get a little bit of a SWR, what do you call it, reflect back to the radio. So that's the keying circuit doing that. It's kind of sending like dead shorts back to the radio for a small time. The radios without SWR protect won't show that. This does have a little bit of reflection, showing about a 1.4. So at least on my system here on my Bird dummy load, showing a little bit of reflect coming back to my radio. It's not horrible or anything, but again, it's noticeable. So what are we going to see different here on PEP? I don't think we're going to see much, but obviously the carrier's higher. Here's PEP, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, maybe a little bit more. it's going up to like 170. Let me put that in that T setting so we can see kind of like, whoops, sorry, real time. So here's more like a real time. 1 2 3 1 2 3, check check check, hello, 1 2 1 2, about 178 max. I think before it was driving it to like 204 on that really dirty Cobra 25. So at the end of the day, this might not be as exciting to some, and if you don't have a good quality meter, you probably wouldn't see power like this on your setup. You would on the 25, because everything's running unlinear fashion. It's distortion drives everything crazy. This way everything looks good, and just because the radio is seeing a little bit of reflection showing a 1.4 doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing or that the radio is doing something wrong, because what we see here at the directional coupler, which is right before it goes into the bird dummy load, we're seeing a really good SWR range. So we'll go to our ohm setting here and just see. So we're pretty much right at 50 ohm, as you can see there. So 1 2 3 4 5, check check. So perfect 50 ohm load, which is kind of hard to come by these days, because a lot of these cheap ones that you can buy, they're not really close. They're like 54 or something. It's not bad, but you know, you get a more quality load with bird. So you know, that's why I like that. But you know, you can believe the tests here, you know, whether some might say that it's all fantasy or whatever. It's more fantasy with the Cobra radio all juiced up like that versus what we're doing here. So at the end of the day, this is the better way to run it for sure. And honestly, I would run this amp in low. I would run the amp in low and just kind of let it do its thing. Bring that carrier all the way down and just kind of let it do its thing, because there's really no difference in PEP. A couple extra watts mean nothing, and I really truly mean that. The extra watts that everybody's striving to get, it means jack of nothing. So everybody wants more power at the end of the day, but again, it's not helping you. It just looks cool on a power meter. Everybody likes more. We all would like more pay at our jobs. Maybe if we're retired, we'd like more pay, less taxes. All that stuff is beneficial, but power on our radio, sometimes more is not better. So this is hopefully a good example of why I say we don't want to run everything to max everything that it's capable of doing. This amp now is running fully linear, and it's going to work a whole lot better. I do not hear my audio coming through here, which is a good sign too, and everything works great. Last thing I can do, just because I want to check this out, I want to check it on sideband. So this one has the automatic sideband, which you would assume that it does, which it does have. So let's just see what we're going to put in on sideband. So this is what I'm putting in on sideband, about 4 watts or something, 5 watts. So you can easily overdrive these, and when you overdrive them, they become unlinear because the power's got to go somewhere, and it oscillates the transistor, which in turn just creates distortion on the output side and causes interference and bleed over and all that stuff. So you don't have to drive amps very hard in a lot of cases. So let's just turn it on. Again, it's in the low power position, so we shouldn't have a problem with 4 watts in. You know, that's basically what the amp's doing. It has that automatic sideband. If that bothered somebody, you could probably go into this amp and you could hardwire a foot switch or a hand switch, and it would stay keyed between words like that. You know, sometimes with amps like this, with the keying circuit, and there's that slight delay, it will send like a spike. You saw that 2.3. That's because it drops and keys up, and for a short moment of time the radio sees like a dead short, and that's why in some cases maybe your SWR protect might go off too on an amp like this. You know, it's always best probably to run a direct key up. It'd be nice if these export radios had a key line on the back where you could just have a key line out, and then amps like this had a key line in, because the key line's a much better way than trying to hot switch it with RF, and that's what these do. They key with RF, and it's better to key with a dedicated key line. That way, as soon as you press the PTT, a little bit of voltage is applied to the keying circuit. It stays on until you let off. In this situation it doesn't, but it still works. So you know, here's the here's the output of this one, about 130 something. So again, I don't know what it's going to do on high, but we'll turn it on and find out. So I just want to be careful with it because I don't want to overdrive it. It shouldn't, I mean 4 watts shouldn't overdrive it, but you know, these old amps you never really know. So yeah, about 4 watts in should be fine. So we'll switch it on high, take a quick peek at high. Here's the high power side right here. So really very little change in power. If anything, it's better to run it in low. If you drive it harder, you'll probably get a little more out of it. But again, unless we're talking we're going to make this thing do 600 watts, which at 150 is, I believe, about 600 watts for the next big change in power. Anything after what we're doing here doesn't matter. And I really mean that when I say it doesn't matter. People stress that it does, but at the end of the day, this amp is running very linear now. We can look at the output here. The output here looks really good. I mean, it's about 3 to 4 kilohertz. It's doing the radio is telling it exactly what it should do because the radio is set up properly. The radio is aligned properly. It's a very linear output. 4 watts or so is little to nothing coming out of this radio. It's the cleanest you'll ever get, and the amp is going to reciprocate that in a very nice fashion. So everything's working perfect. And you couldn't ask for really anything better from this old antique amp. This is the best case scenario for running this thing, really. So I hope you enjoyed it. It really wasn't for trying to sell either one of these, because I don't think that he wants to sell his amp. Personally, I like it. It's a little beat up looking, but as are things with age. So it works phenomenal. You know, I don't know if the receive amp works. Let's see. Yeah, it does work. So that's cool too. Sometimes they don't, you know, that's usually a telltale sign it's been overdriven. Just out of curiosity, I know guys might want to see what's in it. Let's pop the lid off really quick just for the sake of it and take a look at the transistor. Okay, here's a look inside the amp. This is the Eagle TX250A. I'll flip that around so we can have a better look at the transistors, but this is just a basic what it looks like inside. I don't see any parts that really look crispy or anything like that. It's internally fused. So there's our King transistor or King circuit here. Again, you could bypass the transistor and you could wire it direct, probably, if that's something you wanted to do. It wouldn't really help you in a mobile situation. You'd have like a hand key you could hold and just key the amp and it would stay keyed, or a foot key. I like a hand key. I'm not much for using my feet to key things because, you know, I don't know, I just like to key something like I'm keying a mic. I have a Heil PTT switch for my HF setup and stuff like that, where I just hold it and I squeeze it and it keys something. So I like that method better, but some people like a foot switch, and I understand that. You know, like I used to run a foot switch on an old Boomer 35 amp power supply Palomar amp that I used to have years and years ago, and it was on a musical foot switch for like a keyboard or something. So here's our transistor anyways, MRF 492s. They say 8907, so this looks to be a true Motorola transistor. Dual setup here, 2-pill. So Malaysia made. And yeah, it's not a whole lot of excitement in here, but it does work, and it works well, especially when you run it properly. When you overdrive it, eventually what will end up happening is these are obviously, they're going to oscillate, which they do, and that doesn't help your output at all. And then you stress all these, you know, resistors and stuff like that just get stressed, and eventually something will fail if you run this thing too hard, you know. But the problem is, back in the day when these were being made and stuff and probably getting blown up quite often, people just didn't think about stuff like that, you know. In the CB world, unfortunately, it's all about give me more, I want max. And, you know, these things can only take so much abuse, and then finally they'll just crap out. And I can only imagine how many guys might have stuff like this laying in a junk pile somewhere because it's been burned up X amount of times and all that stuff. But this one still works really good, and you know, the bottom looks good. It's got a little bend in it. Maybe somebody, I don't know how that might have got bent, but you know, it could take a little cleaning up, but all in all, it's in pretty good shape. The top is about the worst case scenario, you know, it's all scratched up, but you could you could sand this down and repaint it or something and make it look really good. You know, it's not all like gouged up and beat to hell. So you could really fix this thing up, but why would you really care about it unless you wanted to show it off or something? But all in all, it's a really nice working amp. So he's let me have this twice now to try it, and this is actually the first time I've tried it, so I'm sure he'll be excited to watch the video himself when I post it. And I'm probably gonna work something out with him on it, because it's a local buddy of mine, and I don't know, I like it. Even just to keep it and never use it, I kind of like it. When you run things right, they work good. When you overdrive things, obviously you're creating a bunch of unnecessary distortion and just overpowering everything. So I don't even know what the specs are. Like these kind of amps, they didn't give you specs or anything. Like, you know, RM Italy amps, they give you a whole data sheet and tips on what you should put into the amp, and it's really important to follow that stuff. You know, stuff like this, they didn't tell you anything, so that's where people would make mistakes and overdrive them and think that every single last watt counts. I mean, would I run this with that Cobra 25? Absolutely not. I'd rather run it with this radio, and the radio's doing like 4 watts PP and making the amp do over 100. I mean, what more can you ask for? The radio's doing nothing basically, and the amp's doing all the work, which is what an amp's supposed to do. Let the amp do all the work. Let your radio just do about nothing. Just keep it as clean as you can. The lower the power out of this, the cleaner it is anyway. So you want as clean a signal going in to this to be amplified. You want less of, you know, dirty signal. If you put that dirty signal in like that Cobra, this has no choice but to amplify it. It's what it's designed to do. And then when you hear the oscillation from your power supply or whatever else around you, you know that you're running dirty and it's not going to help you. So 73, it's a nice little MRF 492 2 transistor amp.